and Spanish. And I have 16 plus years working with a local government agency in accounting and finance. So that's where I
Oh,
learned
wow.
all of the Excel, back end accounting, all of that stuff. And I always knew I wanted to own a business one day. I just always thought I needed to have a product. And at some point, I realized I could use my skills. So a lot of the love of this came from um, like shows like Shark Tank, which are probably most entrepreneurs' favorite. And
Love it.
they always talk about they always talk about the numbers, and I always thought it was weird that business owners didn't know their numbers. Like, how do you not, especially going into Shark Tank? But
Yeah.
so that caused me to kind of delve deeper into it because numbers just make sense to me. Not that I'm great at math, but it just always made sense. And so I also learned that in the first 3 years, that's when most new businesses go out of business, and it's the number one reason for that is lack of cash flow. So there's
Interesting.
definitely a need. Yeah, there's definitely a need for a bookkeeping service and seeing your numbers and knowing what they mean to be able to utilize them to make data-driven decisions so that, everybody wants to grow, but you're
Right.
growing at the right rate. And I do a lot of coaching with my clients on mindset and leadership and that kind of stuff too. So it's not just bookkeeping, but yeah.
A little bit of everything. Yeah, that seems to be the approach that works right now, having more of an integrated approach where you're not just doing the books, but you're giving some advice and guidance and just helping business owners see that big picture. Because I know that's something that I am definitely interested in, and I'm not a numbers guy. I'm not I don't want to be doing the books, but I definitely want to know, like, just real quick, what's working, what's not. So have you seen a lot of success as businesses adapt to that more holistic view of bookkeeping and just being on top of their numbers? Has that helped a lot of your clients?
Oh, for sure. They gain clarity, and knowledge is power, right? And
Right.
so a lot of people see reports, and after working with me, it's usually after the first time they see reports. So they just see numbers
Wow.
on a sheet of paper. They don't know what it means. So we talk a lot about, what to look at and what they mean and how to utilize it. And so a lot of my clients come away feeling empowered to make those decisions and, or maybe hold off on certain decisions for a, more equitable time.
Right.
So
There's no better
yeah,
time than now to get started. And like
yeah.
the quote, what is it? If you have to know your numbers to be able to. There's a really good quote about that,
If you
and it
don't know your
eludes me.
numbers, you don't know your business.
Exactly. That's a good one. Yeah. And you can't improve what you can't measure. So having a good
Exactly.
sense of your books is important.
And
I
then what
want
you
to,
track grows. So
right.
if you're looking at your numbers, inevitably it will grow. Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I want to welcome folks who are joining us. We have Oksana, our director of community engagement. Oksana, thank you. And we have the other Oksana. We have both Oksanas in the comments here. So thank you to both of the Oksanas for joining us. Thank you to everyone who is joining this or watching the recording. We get a lot of views on the recordings for these live streams. And if anybody has topics that they want to have covered in the future, let us know. We try to do one of these a month where we cover different business topics, everything from public speaking to social media to finance topics like this, anything that's going to help local businesses. So we want to hear your questions. If anyone has a question about anything related to bookkeeping, please put it in the comments and we will get to it. Why don't we get to one of the first questions just to start the conversation? So we were talking a little bit about knowing your numbers and reports. What type of reports should business owners be asking their bookkeepers for? What reports are most important for business owners?
So first off, the bookkeeping is important so that you have complete and accurate reports, right? Because garbage in, garbage out. So tracking, and so even backtracking more, bookkeeping is tracking what comes in and what goes out, where it's going, where it's coming from. And so the reports that at the very least you should be looking at is your profit and loss. It's called a P&L. And basically the top of the report shows income, and then the middle is your expenses, and at the end it's what's left over. So if you have something left over, that's a profit when you're in the black, not in the green. Mm. And then if it's a negative, you're in the red, and that means it's a loss. Mm. But you can look at, like, if you have your income streams itemized, you can see what's making you money, what's not making you money, where should you focus your attention, what's not really worth it or not really reaping the reward that you thought it would, or maybe pivot and do a different service, product, whatever it is. And then in the expenses, it's all itemized as well. And your expenses translate to tax deductions, tax write-offs, whichever word you use. Basically, it reduces your taxable income or your taxable for your business. And then what's left, you're only taxed on the net profit. So if you have a loss, no tax. If you have a profit, that's the only part that you're taxed on. And we can talk a little bit more later about the difference between the LLC and S Corp, but most here are probably LLC, limited liability corporation, and that whatever's left there at the bottom, that passes through to your personal taxes. So it can either increase your taxable, your income, or decrease it. So there's two ways to increase that profit. You either grow your sales or you reduce your expenses. So it's really nice to have an idea of where you're at. You can either further itemize. You can look at your recurring expenses, a lot of subscriptions that we have. Yeah. You know, are you paying for two, or maybe you had a free trial and then it started, you know, charging, or is there a better option out there, something that encompasses maybe 2 or 3 of the services that you're doing? You know, when we start, we just need to get started, right? We don't do a whole lot of research on what's necessarily the best. And so a lot of business ownership is trial and error. And so in those expenses, you can kind of find leaks in your business. And, you know, so the key figures to look at are your sales, your gross sales, your total expenses, and then that net profit at the bottom. And so one of the things that irks me is when I see influencers say, oh, I made $100,000 in my business, and I can show you how, or whatever arbitrary number. And that might be what came in, but that's not necessarily what their net is, right? So, and we don't know behind the scenes. These reports show you the behind the scenes of your business, what it really is costing you to do business.
Yeah. And marketing agencies are notorious for that type of creative reporting as well, where they might be running ad campaigns for a client and running all of the ad spend through the agency and then reporting on that as income. So it sounds like a really high number, but it's just going in one end and going out to Facebook or Google or Meta or whatever ad platform the ad spend is going to. So yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned the influencers. Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah,
in
there's
a TikTok
a lot of
video.
Clickbait. Yeah, it does. It sounds great.
I like that you mentioned breaking everything down and itemizing it and reviewing it. That's something that I started doing a few years ago, especially when it comes to expenses. For me personally, running a marketing agency, one of our biggest expenses outside of labor is software subscriptions. And so something that I do that might be helpful to people is I try to go through all of our subscriptions probably once a month, and I have a task on the calendar for me to do that. And then if it's something that I know that we're going to continue using, I'll switch it from a monthly to an annual plan. And usually there's some savings there on average, usually probably about a 20% savings for most of the software out there. For business owners, there's usually some incentive to go with that annual plan, as long as you know you're going to stick with it. So maybe that helps. Are there any other tips or recommendations or red flags that you would want to give to business owners as they're reviewing their expenses every month?
Definitely look for duplication. You know, depending on your business, you can also break it down further to, like, if you resell a product or are manufacturing a product, you can even break it down to like a per product cost. Pricing is my favorite thing ever. So, and that you can't do accurate pricing without the books being done, because you need to know your expenses so that you know how much you're making off of each job. So if it's a service, same thing. How much are you making from each job? Because you might need to adjust your pricing accordingly. I mean, we're all seeing prices go up. So, everybody is kind of in that boat right now. And going back to profit, I just wanted to say that like profit is where your dreams come true, right? Profit is where your kids' braces come from, your vacation, that pool, if you want to reinvest in your business, that's where it's going to come from. Sorry, my kids just walked in. Excuse me. Bye. Thank you.
We're doing it live, folks. We're doing
Right?
it live.
Mom life.
Right.
So as far as tips, like the number one rule I would say is separate your business and your personal bank account.
I learned that on day one. Yeah, I'm surprised because I know we were talking. You say that's still a pretty common issue among entrepreneurs and business owners. I'm actually surprised because that's
Definitely.
to me, that's like not even the first thing you should do. It's like it's before that. It's zero. You should absolutely separate your business from your personal on day one of starting a business.
So since this is like a local business club, I'm going to be talking about Florida specifically. So you get your EIN number through the IRS. You get it instantly online. Then you do your SunBiz registration. So the one is for IRS. The other is for the state of Florida.
That's,
state. And so you do it through SunBiz. Both of those documents have to go with you to the bank in order to get a business bank account. Now, if you're still like in a side hustle stage and you haven't really decided if you want to make this happen, at the very least, get a separate personal account so that you're keeping it all separate. Because again, you don't know the true cost of business if everything is all mixed up. So if you're keeping it all separate, you know what's coming in, what's going out. You draw from the same account. All the deposits go to the same account. And it's really hard. I guess a lot of it comes from the idea that, well, I know there's like money in the business account, so I'm just going to swipe the business card. Whereas I'm not totally sure what's in my personal account, so I'm not going to swipe that card. But you can literally, with the internet and all these apps out there, you can use Zelle, which is instant. And I've done it before myself, like at the grocery store. You can be at the checkout and send yourself money instantly. So that's how you can pay yourself, especially as an LLC, as long as it's a transfer or even writing a check to yourself. If you have more consistent income, then you can do like a weekly or a bi-weekly draw, but that's what it ends up being called. You're not on payroll. It's a owner's draw or a owner's distribution or owner's compensation, however you want to call it. It's not payroll.
Right. Interesting. We are having some questions come in, so I'd love to get to some of our questions. And also, Nelson, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get to your question in just 1 second. We just want to get to this one question from Oksana first. Oksana asks, how do you stay up to date with tax laws? And maybe this is also a good segue to just quickly explain the difference between what a bookkeeper does, such as yourself, and then some of the other people that are tangentially related to this topic, such as tax planning attorneys, CPAs, just how everything works together.
Right, cool. So keeping up with tax law. So I am not a tax preparer. I'm not giving tax advice. What I'm talking about here is based on my experience and my understanding of tax law. Yes, the laws are ever changing. Usually, like in my field, since I'm a certified QuickBooks Pro and a certified Xero Pro, when those things happen, we usually get like updates so that we can implement for our clients, which is really nice. If there's specific tax law that changes that is specific to you or you think may affect you, then definitely get in communication with somebody who does tax preparation, because they'll know the ins and outs of the law. I choose not to do taxes because IRS forms make me a little batty. Like they're not very clear. So I leave that to the pros. And so, as you mentioned, yes, it's like a financial team. So the best way that I've heard it described is your bookkeeper is like the triage nurse. They check your vitals, and if there's any issues, they'll let the doctor know. And then the accountant, tax preparer, is like the doctor who comes in and can prescribe remedies and give more advising. And tax planning, now tax planning just basically means how to save more in taxes. When you're making more money, you're apt to pay more in taxes, and there's strategies around that, like annuities, retirement. There's all these different ways to save, and so that's where tax planning comes in. And like now is the best time to do tax planning because you can implement those strategies before the end of the year, right? Because our tax year goes calendar. So I, as the bookkeeper, I track it coming in and going out. I give you your reports. I make sure you understand your reports. I help you understand the deductions and when you should swipe your card for Starbucks and when you shouldn't. And, you know, what's considered a meal, what's considered business travel. You know, some of them are very straightforward. Some of them are a little nuanced. So I can help guide on that front so that you're making better decisions on the daily basis, because a lot of it is habit and mindset. And then the accountant comes in, accountant, tax preparer, whatever you want to call them. They come in and determine what your tax liability is. If you're going to owe more than $1,000 for the year, then you should be doing quarterly payments. But the accountant will do that. Now, when I send a report, I let you know, hey, great, you made a profit. Of that profit, put away 25% in a savings account for taxes, that kind of thing. You know, I've heard 20%, I've heard 30%. 25 is kind of the sweet spot for my clients. And then once they've had their taxes done, then their accountant can say, okay, you should actually be saving 30%.
Yeah, you have a pretty good forecast.
To be on the safe side.
Yeah, because those quarterly payments are based on the previous year, from what I understand.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so we have a lot of tax preparers, CPAs, tax planning people in our group, which is great. So I'm starting to develop some partnerships there to be able to understand their services so that I can refer them. And not all tax preparers do tax planning. So it might be a
or
group,
bookkeeping.
It might be a team that you have. Yes, and some accountants offer bookkeeping. Some tax preparers do as well. So, you know, as long as you're getting reports monthly, then I think that's a well-rounded team. A lot of accountants don't do it as regularly. And so that's just one of those things that you want to ask if you are paying for that service. Like if they're charging you for bookkeeping, ask, how often are you doing it? Can I go into my QuickBooks and run reports, that kind of thing, because they might leave it till, you know, end of a quarter or something like that. And then you don't know what's done and you don't know where you stand. So like, it's really not helpful to have it in that sense, because you really should be seeing your numbers at least once a month. At the very least every quarter, but once a month allows you to make changes in real time. If you're only doing your books to be able to file for taxes, you're doing it wrong.
Right. Now, even though you're not a tax preparer, are you still staying, I'm assuming you're staying up to date on the tax laws as best you can. And if so, are there any resources that you look at on a regular basis that you might want to share with our listeners?
Well, like I said, I get updates from QuickBooks and Xero whenever there is a change in tax law. Right now we have an election going on, so I have read many articles about how either way would change things for business owners. Like I did a lot of research on the $50,000 deduction for startups and what that really means, because startup might mean something different to us than what the IRS says. So, you know, it all depends on the jargon that they use. And so I personally prefer, I either get the updates or there's another like a newsletter that I get that I can't recall the name right now, but that's how I get my updates.
Staying up. Yeah, and you're in it every
Yeah.
day. So I do want to say we do have to have a disclaimer here, since I think I forget what we were just talking about, but it reminded me. This is a podcast or a live stream that is just for informational and entertainment purposes. It's not intended as tax advice, financial advice, or legal advice. So for anyone watching or listening to this, you definitely want to consult one-on-one with a qualified professional before making any financial or tax or legal decisions based on any of the information that's shared on this episode. So we had to
And you
get
mentioned
that out of the
about
way.
a tax lawyer.
Yeah.
So I usually recommend to businesses, like if somebody's just starting out, they don't know what to do. No, they don't know, should I be an LLC? Should I be a sole prop? Whatever
Yeah.
the situation is. Or they have big plans and they want to do like a tree structure. And, a lot of that goes back to the influencers too.
Mm-hmm.
I always recommend to talk to a business lawyer, somebody who does business law, contract law for your structure, for your entity. Just because that's a legal thing, right?
Right.
So a lawyer will be able to tell you how it needs to be structured, what they need to be legally filed as, so that you
Right.
have that distinction.
That makes sense. Yeah, get the legal stuff handled by a business attorney. One question we do have from Nelson is, Nelson asks, are there any advantages with being an S Corp versus an LLC? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. So S Corp, so most businesses starting out will start as an LLC. An S Corp gets more tax savings, but you don't really see that benefit of tax savings until you are at a higher net profit. Because when you're on an S Corp, you have to be on payroll, W-2 payroll. Like what we talked about before, where you just transfer money, that's not payroll. That's an owner's draw. But when you make the S Corp election, which is what you're telling the IRS to tax you as, then instead of it being a pass through and going onto your personal taxes like you would as an LLC, your business is taxed as a separate entity, right? And so it all comes down to self-employment tax and the payroll taxes. So you have to have the profit to support the cost of payroll, because yes, you're getting a check, but you're also paying the tax, the employer required tax, and you're paying another service to process the payroll for you. And generally when you do that, like I advise my clients to go with a payroll service, because they take care of the quarterly filings of the 941 and all of that. And if you get a letter from the IRS saying, something was wrong or missed or whatever, then you can just give it to them, and they take it on as their problem. Like they represent you and deal with it. So that's the service that you're paying for, but that's an additional cost.
Right.
So as long as the number varies. I've heard $50,000 net profit all the way up to $85,000 net profit. Net profit after expenses.
All expenses. Yep.
After all the
So
expenses.
if you're at that
bottom
range,
number on the P&L.
That's when you should start thinking about making the switch from LLC to S Corp. After you
50,
consult
000,
somebody one-on-one, of course, to see if it's right for you.
At 50,000, your accountant or tax preparer will at least bring it up. I will say that I work with businesses all over the country and tax preparers all over the country. And while we don't have a state income tax, in other states that threshold is higher, because their state income tax just doesn't make it worth it for them to make that switch. Sorry, you froze a second.
Yep.
And so the ultimate goal of a business is to make enough money to get on your own payroll, because that means you've got consistent money coming in. So the goal is to make that S Corp election. And so just looking at my notes. So yeah, when you are as the S corp, you're paying for your employee taxes. So it could be you and other people,
Mm-hmm.
and then the employer as well. And the difference is on LLC, you're paying 15.3% is the self-employment tax on all of the net profit. So whereas as an S corp, you're only paying that basically self-employment as FICA and Medicare, which is your Social Security, Medicare benefits that we pay into.
Right.
And that's only being, that percentage only is calculated off of your payroll. So then the rest of your profit doesn't get taxed, is not subjected to the self-employment tax.
Which in theory should give you some tax savings, which is why a lot of businesses choose to do it. Now, something I learned recently is that you can be an S corp and you don't have to change your business filing. I remember being super confused about this because I thought, oh, well, if you're an LLC and you want to elect to file as an S corp or whatever, you had to like change everything. But you can remain as your LLC, but then you file as an S corp. Am I getting the terminology correct?
Correct. So when you file for your EIN, you're telling the IRS how to tax you. And then the other is so one's a legal entity and one is a taxation entity. So you can switch, you can still be an LLC and be taxed as an S corp. And so how that changes things for the bookkeeper is you have to be on payroll. That is a IRS rule. There is a line on the S corp tax return for owner's compensation, and if that line is 0, that's a red flag. And it'll leave you open to further examination, possible audit, that type of thing, which nobody wants, right? And then while yes, I recommend that you work with a payroll processing company, it doesn't always translate correctly into accounting software. So the bookkeeper will make sure that that back end part of it happens. Because I'm sure a lot of accountants will tell you and tax preparers will tell you that payroll is usually an issue.
Right. Nelson has a follow-up question here. So he says, so can you change your business from an S corp to an LLC or vice versa?
So I've never heard of somebody going from S corp to LLC. If most don't start out the gate as S corp because they don't have the income to support the S corp. Because again, you have to be on payroll.
Right. Usually you start as an LLC and then you eventually get to that revenue level where you elect to file as an S corp.
Right.
Yeah, profit. Yeah.
Because it has to support. So the way that accountants have shown me that they figure it out is they look at what your tax savings would be either way. And if your savings can offset the cost, and your cost is the tax prep fees, because now you're not just doing one tax return for personal, now you're doing a personal and a business one. So you have to pay for that, and then the payroll fees as well. So as long as your savings offsets those two costs, then they'll usually suggest, yes, like it's now or never type of, not never, but a lot of business owners are cautious to do that. And because that's more pressure, right? Like, oh, I have to make payroll type of thing. Whereas the owner's draw of an LLC is kind of, as needed, as wanted type of thing.
And that's another interesting point, because I was watching a YouTube video the other day about what the payroll actually has to be. And I think there's some type of minimum standard. It's not an exact amount, but it's like it has to be a reasonable payroll.
Comparable to your...
Yeah.
So like if I'm paying myself, you can go on LinkedIn and they have a pretty cool salary search, like median search, and you can put in your area of the country and your title, and it'll tell you how much, and you want to be around that. So you don't want to pay yourself too little, because the IRS won't like that either. But you also don't want to overdo it.
Yeah.
And then there's other ways that again, with tax planning, that you can save yourself more in taxes. It doesn't have to necessarily be with your compensation.
Interesting. Definitely something that that people who are interested should chat about with their tax preparer, with their bookkeeper, with their business attorney, because it's there's a lot of nuances to it, but it's something to look into. We want to welcome Workwise. Workwise, thank you for joining us. You say this is amazing guidance and education. Thank you for presenting. Well, thank you for joining us. If anyone has a question, feel free to put it in the chat. We typically do these live streams for about 45 minutes, so we have about another 10 minutes or so where we'll take your questions, and we will cover some other common topics. I know a question I had is related to software. When it comes to accounting, it seems like QuickBooks is the be-all, the everything. Our company has been using FreshBooks, which is like a QuickBooks Lite for a long time, but we are actually switching this month. We just started switching to QuickBooks, and it's stressful having used FreshBooks for literally like 7 years, and now we're moving over to the real software, QuickBooks. But I know that seems to be the standard. Is that what you find, is that QuickBooks is really the gold standard when it comes to accounting software for small businesses?
So I wouldn't call it the gold standard.
Okay.
I don't know that one exists, to be honest with you, because again, every business is so different. I personally prefer Xero.
Ah,
And that's
interesting.
Xero with an X. They're
Okay,
out of
yeah.
New Zealand. And, QuickBooks pricing keeps going up, and it's not even an annual thing. I think in this last year, it's gone up 3 times already.
Wow.
And it's hard, right? Because you've got all of your information, all of your history there. So do you want to make the switch, like you in FreshBooks to QuickBooks? It just really depends on the business and how you're utilizing it. I personally recommend that you don't use your accounting software for invoicing. I know I probably get a lot of flack for that.
I would love to hear why.
I recommend I recommend a industry specific CRM.
Okay.
A CRM is customer relationship manager, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if it's industry specific, like I'm not sure if QuickBooks can do it now, but QuickBooks used to have a hard time with charging a deposit and then a first payment and a second payment type of thing. In a CRM, like let's say for a roofing company, they can handle that because that's how they're building out their software, because they're building it out for their client. So, or an event planner. Honeybooks is very popular because it also integrates a calendar and the booking itself. And a lot of times in your CRM, and I know that QuickBooks has this option, but a lot of times in your CRM, you have your email marketing as well. You keep all of your contact information in there. And so most companies, most small business owners have a CRM already. And so I like to keep the accounting to the accounting side, to the tracking and to the reporting level, because it's very easy to click the wrong thing. And then it causes, a ripple effect, and it can get very messy very quickly. And also I've had clients who get tempted to do some of the bookkeeping because that's the first screen that comes up on QuickBooks. Right. They're
Let
like,
me categorize some expenses while I'm here sending out some invoices.
Right. So, I like that division, but again, it just kind of depends on the business. Another option is Wave, which I just recently had the exposure to, like actually seeing it with content with data in there. And it's not as sophisticated. It's not as customizable. It's not as robust as a QuickBooks or a Xero. I personally would go between either one. But yeah, I prefer Xero. I like the reporting in Xero.
I was going to ask you what you like about Xero, because I've heard of Xero. Is it just has a better reporting interface?
It's a lot more customizable. You can set a lot of standardizations. It's very friendly with a lot of banks.
Hmm.
And so that's another thing that we could talk about. So when you hire a bookkeeper, you give them what's called accountant access
Hmm.
to your accounting software, to your bank accounts, to your checking, credit cards, all of those things. And what that means is, because I know a lot of people are fearful to like give all their information to somebody that they might not know very well. Um, and so what that means is it's view only. So I can see statements, I can see transactions, I can see copies of checks, but I can't move any money.
Hmm.
I can see, I'm not sure if I can see the full account numbers. Actually, yes, I can. But that allows for me to have the autonomy to do the work when I need to do the work, and I'm not relying on the client. I'm not bugging them to get me
Right.
statements. I'm not bugging them to answer questions. And like you mentioned about it being stressful to do that switch, in the beginning of that switch or of hiring a bookkeeper, it is more high contact
Yeah.
because you're still getting to know each other. I'm getting to know the business and figure out what your routines are, what your habits are, your purchases, that kind of thing. And after 2 to 3 months, that backs off and it's a lot more, uh, you only hear from me once a month type of thing. So,
That's good. Yeah. Well, no, and that's really good advice about the using separate software for invoicing. And I'm assuming like if you're doing any type of service business where you're tracking time, you would also recommend using a separate tool for that rather than using like a time tracking feature in something like Zero or QuickBooks.
I know QuickBooks used to have T-sheets, and then I believe it got replaced with something.
Hmm.
But then I think they abandoned it. So I'm not too sure. I used to work for QuickBooks,
Oh,
and that was during the migration away from T-sheets. So,
okay.
uh, and the idea behind that is because QuickBooks can process your payroll, you can track all of your hours or your contractors or your employees, and they can do their own clocking in type of thing, and then it translates to the payroll more seamlessly.
Got it.
Uh, when it comes to me managing payroll, I say it's payroll management because I don't want to be the one responsible for pushing the button on a certain day.
Hmm.
And most of the time, business owners want to be the one doing that anyway. And I like it as well because then they have the awareness of how much is coming out of the account and on what day. And, because what a bookkeeper would do is not necessarily daily, account management.
Right.
Usually it's a weekly, every other week, even monthly thing. So if it's something, payroll is usually a higher uh, amount. So I like for them to have the awareness of, okay, this is when it's happening
Got it. Good
and how
advice.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we want to welcome Zachary for joining us. Thank you for tuning into the live stream. So we're going to wrap up pretty soon. So if anyone has any final questions for Grisell, definitely put them in the chat. We can certainly take a couple more questions. What are your thoughts on business owners who are putting most of their expenses on credit cards versus debit cards? Anything you want to share with our listeners around that topic?
So I personally advise clients to, if they have a business credit card, to put those expenses on a business credit card on a recurring monthly basis and then pay off the card
Hmm.
every month. Because there's so many different cards out there with different like rewards options
Oh
and people
yeah,
want to take
the
advantage of the
points.
rewards.
Yeah.
Same with your bank account, keep it separate. I know it's very tempting because your personal card gives you all of your travel miles,
Right.
but keep it
You can
separate.
get those on a business card too. So there's definitely
Exactly.
really good
And
cards out there for businesses.
for sure.
Mhm.
And then you can also control when the payment comes out. You can control, I mean, even with the subscriptions, a lot of times you can change when the payment happens. So it's more consistent when your income's coming in, because a lot of people are busier at the end of the month, that kind of thing. Um, Now, carrying debt on the company, so that's a different report, which is the balance sheet. Balance sheet shows your assets, which is what you own,
Hmm.
and it shows your liabilities, which is what you owe. and then the difference between the two is equity. And so say you want to go get a loan, or if your personal, if your only source of income is your business, you don't want to have a whole lot of liabilities or money owed to people, because that's going to make you look less desirable. Same with profit and loss. You want to show a profit because you want them to know that you're profitable and in good standing. They want to know you're going to pay back. So you have to show that you have a profit. Like a lot of accountants, it was like an old school of thought to run your life through your business so that you can have as small of a profit as possible so that you're taxed as low as possible. But the problem with that is you don't have a true idea of what your business is making. And then it affects you when it comes to loans, credit cards, mortgage is the big thing, because they're not going to approve you, or you'd have a high rate or that kind of thing.
So I think one of the takeaways there is you have to be clear on what your business goals are. What are your objectives? Because if you're looking to exit your business or sell, you have different goals, and your balance sheet or your financials need to work for you. And so you can definitely work with a professional to, get things where they need to be. Danny, welcome. Danny, for joining us. Our Port St. Lucie Business Club event director has joined us. Better late than never. Absolutely. Vanessa, thank you for joining us. And Oksana, you have a question here. How do you find a balance between family and work? Interesting question.
I protect my calendar, like at all costs. I know I get a lot of flack for it. I don't give out a business phone number. I don't even have one. I am strictly virtual. We do it on Zoom. I utilize an app called Voxer, which is like a walkie-talkie app, because a lot.
Oh yeah, I love Voxer. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Nextel beep beep.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know it was still
Back in
around.
the
I used to
day.
use it a long time ago. You use that with clients?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, cool.
It's nice because all of my business things are in that one app, and sending an email can get long and cumbersome, and a lot of people won't read it. So what I usually do is I'll send a message in Voxer, explain it, and then I'll say following up with an email kind
That's
of
awesome.
thing. So it's documented, because the app won't document the voice part. And then, so I pretty much stop at 3:00. And I know I posted something about this the other day about working hours. I drop off my kids at 8. I come home, have breakfast, I get to work. And if I have to run errands or do one-on-ones or anything like that, I sprinkle them in throughout the week to get out of the house. And then pretty much at 3:00, I stop, I make dinner, pick up kids, and that's family time. I very much am not on the computer or the phone unless I really, really, really have to be.
Unless you've been invited to an awesome Port St. Lucie Business Club live stream at 8:00 on a Monday.
Yes. Right? Well, that's what I was going to say. I usually pick work back up after bedtime.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, 8 or 8:30. I'm a night owl, so
Good.
I like, the evening.
Worked out.
So.
Me too. Danny says 3 p.m. What? Oh my goodness, that's bank teller hours.
It's surprising.
That is bank teller hours.
I justify it to myself, at least, because I know that I'm going to follow up with it in the evening.
Right.
And then it also forces me to be really productive during the day. It's not always easy. Like, working from home is hard. I know it sounds glamorous and wonderful, but I get distracted easily. The
grass is always greener. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to work at home, and then they do, and then there's all these distractions, and then we complain.
The laundry's got to get done.
Yeah. They're like, well, you're so lucky you work from home. No, it's just the way
Believe
it is.
me, the flexibility is a beautiful thing, because I don't have to ask for permission to go pick up my kid when they're sick at school or anything like that. I appreciate it. I'm grateful for it. But I've worked really hard to get here. And I also, so much of business ownership is trial and error.
Yeah.
And I learned the hard way about protecting my hours, protecting my calendar, and making sure that I don't allow those boundaries to get overstepped. So,
That's important. I need to do a better job at that. Danny has a question
Not
here.
easy.
This is a good question to sort of wrap everything up, because we do want to talk a little bit about what services you offer, how people can get in touch if they have questions. So Danny has a question here. Who is your ideal client, and what does your ideal client's profile look like?
Ooh. So I primarily work with service-based businesses or trade-based businesses.
Okay.
So like pool cleaners, window cleaners, estheticians, even online service providers. I tend to stay away from things with inventory, restaurants, most construction, sales tax. And it's just because I know what I know, and the people who are good at that because those things are complicated.
Right.
I'm not saying I'd never do it in the future, but for now, my happy place is service providers and trades, because they really need it too. Like trades,
Yeah.
a lot from what I have found, it's usually a wife is doing it, or a spouse, a friend, a neighbor, somebody who has QuickBooks experience, maybe not a lot of accounting experience, that kind of thing. And I love clients who are not just looking to grow their business, but to grow as a person, to grow as a business owner, because those people are the ones who heed your advice. I'm not asking for everybody to follow me blindly, but, some of them are rules that I have to enforce,
Right.
like the commingling.
Right.
But it's just exciting to me because their excitement gets me all jumped up, and it you feed off of each other and you bring each other up. And most of my clients have become friends. So yeah, looking to grow, looking to find more time in their business, because I can save you money through tax deductions, but I can also buy you back more time.
Yeah.
Bookkeeping, in my view, is a necessary investment. It is not an expense, because you need to know your numbers. And what else was part of his question? Ideal client and profile. I think I said it.
Yeah. And Danny has a follow-up here. Employee count. Do you prefer single member, sole prop with no or little employee count?
That doesn't really have an effect for me, honestly, because I'm not processing payroll. You might not have been here for that part of it. Danny, what I do as far as payroll goes is the back end, making sure that the payroll processor, all of that information translates into the accounting software correctly. So no, that's not really a thing that I consider. When it comes to, my services, I do all the bookkeeping, the tracking, I run the reports, I look over the reports to make sure that they make sense and there's no red flags and things aren't showing up the way they're not supposed to show up. So I review it and then I send it, and I provide the profit and loss, balance sheet, and a general ledger, which is just a list of all of the expenses, and you can see how they were categorized. And then you get a message from me with a summary breakdown of this is your income, here's your expenses, and I note your highest expenses and your profit or loss. And then I also let you know how much to save for taxes based on that profit amount. And, if there's any celebrations to be had, I celebrate you. And if there's, room for improvement or things that I noticed, like, hey, you've got a lot of Apple subscriptions here.
And you're
Can we
like, uh-oh, you
verify
better
that these
cut
are
some
all
expenses.
business?
Yeah.
I'm never going to tell you how to spend your money.
Yeah.
It's your business. But if you are looking for the advice, I can't see what those Apple subscriptions are for. So I might ask you to review that those are all business expenses and not some personal ones mixed in there.
Right.
So yeah, I do more than just the bookkeeping. I do some advising as well. Eventually I will be moving into the CFO realm.
Nice.
We'll get there.
That is awesome. And if someone wants to work with you or have a consultation with you or learn more about your services, where's the best place for them to do all that?
So on my website, www.busygbooks.com, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can sign up for my newsletter. We call it The Hive. And it's, at this point in time, a once a month newsletter where you get important dates, tips, any upcoming events. Like in my last newsletter, you guys found out about tonight. Any deals that we're having. I always offer referral fees, so I remind people about that. And you don't have to be a client to get a referral fee either. And right now, there's also a button on there at the top that says get a quote, and that'll take you to like a questionnaire. And then I'll follow up with an email with a calendar link, and we get on a call. Generally, that's like a 15 to 30-minute call to see which service aligns, because it just depends on where you are in your business journey. Like the people who are just starting out, I offer an Ask Me Anything advisory call, and literally it's Ask Me Anything. We talk a lot about what we just talked about here tonight, and I can guide and help you know what to do from the very beginning. A lot of that is, very brand new businesses or not even started businesses. Like, where do I start? And then I also offer a bookkeeping checkup, which is 45 to 60 minutes on a Zoom. We share screen and you show me, I call it a 10-point inspection, and you show me your QuickBooks, your Xero, whatever it is. And, we meet you where you're at. We look at how things are going right now. And I make recommendations on things that need to be changed, updated. You get a PDF of my notes, my findings, and then you get if you want a quote for monthly services, then I give you a quote, and I can do it right on the call based on what I see. It just gives me the chance to see like the integrity of the books that are currently there and how much cleanup and fixing on the back end needs to happen. And then you also get a week of Voxer support so that you can follow up or ask any questions you forgot to ask in the call, and that's $99, which is super affordable. And then also, if you end up signing up for monthly, then that $99 comes off of your first invoice. So it's like you got nothing to lose.
Nice. Well, we put the link in the chat so everyone can go check out busygbooks.com. I definitely recommend, even if you already have a bookkeeper, go sign up for the Hive for your newsletter. I signed up. I think you do a fantastic job. Just in general, as a marketer, you are doing a great job with your marketing. I also recommend everyone go follow you on Instagram. You have a lot of followers for a bookkeeping page. I work with a lot of small businesses, all different types of service businesses, and usually the Instagram presence is not where people want it to be, but you do an amazing job with the story highlights. The grid looks beautiful. The content is helpful. So it's a good example for anyone who wants to get their Instagram game and their newsletter game going.
Definitely follow, definitely sign up, because you'll get lots of value and some silliness in between, because that's just me.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, we want to also remind everyone to RSVP for the next Port St. Lucie Business Club networking event, which is going to be on September 27th. It's a Friday night. We're testing out a Friday night event. So that's just in a little over a week away.
Next week?
Yeah, next week, Friday. It's going to be 6 p.m. at the St. Lucie Lanes. We've been there twice now, I believe, and it's a beautiful venue. It's $10. You get a drink ticket. You get appetizers. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of people there. So definitely RSVP in the link that we just shared. And we want to thank everyone who showed up and answered, and for everyone who asked questions today. We had our Director of Community Engagement, Oksana, who is overseeing our new Community Connectors program and doing a great job. And I know a lot of the folks here today are community connectors. If you want to get involved in that program with the business club, definitely reach out to Oksana. And then we have Danny, our event director for the Port St. Lucie Business Club. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for helping make all of our events the absolute best that they can be. And Grisell, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to share these tips. And I'll leave the last word to you. What's what's the final word you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
Run your reports.
Run your reports.
Make sure your bookkeeping is complete and accurate. And if it's not, you don't have to do it yourself. It's a stressful thing. And if you don't understand it, leave it to somebody who does. And it's a necessary investment, cost of business that you won't regret.
Well said.
So we take the sting out of doing your book.
I love it. I love the branding. It all ties together so nicely. Thank you, Grisell. I hope everyone has a fantastic night. We'll see you all next time. Take care.